Thank you very much, Sarah, for that introduction. I'm honored to speak at your graduation. As you heard, my daughter Mara will be graduating with you today, which makes it extra special. My wife and I have 3 children, but Mara is the youngest, so we will soon have an empty nest. My own high school graduation was 42 years ago, but as your parents and grandparents will tell you, time goes by in a blink of an eye. The question all of you will face is, how do I make the most of it? When you leave home, whether for college, the military, or a job, you will discover you have more freedom than you've ever had before. The freedom to experiment, the freedom to explore, the freedom to make mistakes. You'll have to learn to make the most of that freedom. Now, many of you will go to college next, and that's certainly a good start. But too many students these days go to college thinking only of their future careers. Now, that's understandable. College is very expensive, and many of you or your families are taking out loans to help pay for it. But college is not just about careers, or at least it shouldn't be. You don't go to college to get a job. You go to college to hone your ability to think critically and creatively. That's what will help you get a job and excel at it. For those of you who are planning to enter the workforce now, remember that you can never stop learning. Now, I was one of those odd people who always knew what they wanted to do when they grew up. When I was in 5th grade, I decided I wanted to be a journalist. Now, of course, to really be a journalist, you need 2 things, 20 cups of coffee and a closet full of baggy clothes. I had neither, but I didn't let that stop me. I created a newsletter for my neighborhood and grandly called it the Cincinnati Fact. By the time I was in high school, I was certain that journalism was the right career choice for me. Yet when I told my father, who was a successful business executive, that I wanted to be a reporter, he asked, "How are you going to make a living doing that?" Now, it's not really a bad question, though I really resented it at the time, and of course I did. I was a teenager. In truth, it may have been a good question, because it made me determined to prove him wrong. You should never do things for money, I thought. Now, here's the funny thing. Years later, when I mentioned that remark to my father and how much it had motivated me, he had no memory of even making that comment. Now, that's life in a nutshell. Things will happen to you, or will be said to you, that will turn out to be deeply important to you and only to you. Few others may have noticed, but those events or words will make a real difference in your life. So you can't plan on the future. I mean, you can't wait on the future. You can't plan on it. Success often depends on luck, fate, timing, and the occasional dash of voodoo. But you can try to manage it. So this is a graduation speech, so of course I'm contractually obligated to offer some advice. So here are 3 tips for managing the future. First, have a clear sense of your goals. 2, don't be afraid of failure. And 3, find a passion. When I started in journalism, I had the short-term goal of wanting to work for a major newspaper and the long-term goal of wanting to write about foreign policy. I had received my master's degree in international affairs at Columbia University, but no one was going to hire me straight away to cover foreign policy. However, I had noticed that business journalism was then a growth area in the industry, and I figured I would get a certain expertise in a particular business subject at a trade publication, and then a major newspaper would hire me to cover that subject. Now, in retrospect, it sounds kind of like a harebrained scheme, but it actually worked. I started covering Wall Street for a business newsletter, and within 3 years, I was hired to cover Wall Street by Newsday, then one of the 10 biggest newspapers in the country. Now, I really didn't want to cover business. It was just a way to achieve my short-term goal. Eventually, I was transferred to Washington to cover economic policy. When I arrived in Washington, a veteran reporter took me aside and gave me this advice. Always take the job he meant the bosses, always take the job they want you to have, not the job you want. If you take the job they want you to have, they will never forget it. If you take the job you want to have, they will never let you forget it. Some years after I joined the Washington Post, I asked to run the Post's Brussels bureau. My wife and I had always wanted to work overseas, and my boss okayed my request. We excitedly started looking for housing and schools in Belgium's capital. But then the managing editor of the newspaper took me to lunch and said, in effect, He didn't care much about the Brussels Bureau and would prefer I cover the White House or the State Department instead. Now, that was a bit of a surprise, but I remember the words of that grizzled reporter, so I chose the State Department and gave up on Brussels. Little did that grateful editor know that covering the State Department had really been my long-term goal. And as luck would have it, the Post closed the Brussels Bureau a year later for financial reasons. I ended up writing about foreign policy for 9 years, traveling with 3 different secretaries of state. You may not always have the success with meeting your goals. Many of you may not have goals yet, but it's important to develop goals both for the short term and the long term. I've had a terrific career because I never lost sight of my goals. Second bit of advice, don't be afraid of failure. Now, as high school graduates, you have probably experienced some measure of failure, a bad grade, an awkward prom proposal, accidentally liking a crush's post on Instagram, posting something on Rinsta when you meant to post it on Finsta. It's hard out there these days, I know. But believe you, many of you have not really tasted failure. In our society these days, failure is often considered a negative. Nobody likes to be a loser. But here's the truth. You will learn more from your failures than your successes. Early in my career at that business newsletter, I wrote an article about a financial executive that resulted in a threatened lawsuit. My writing was not precise, allowing readers to make false assumptions. It was an embarrassing failure that might have cost me my job. In fact, my company had to pay a substantial sum in order to avoid an extended legal battle. But it also taught me a lesson about the importance of precision and accuracy, one that I have never forgotten. I was 25 years old at the time, and now I have a job where my title is the fact checker. If you have not failed at something, it often means you've not taken a chance. It means you've not pushed yourself hard enough or pushed the envelope far enough. Every successful person has a history of failures, but these leaders ultimately succeeded because they learned from their mistakes and misjudgments. When you fail, don't just brush it off and move on. Consider it. Learn from it. You need to learn how to be self-critical and reflective. My last bit of advice is find a passion. As I said before, you should not do things just for money. I'm passionate about writing, about seeing the world, about being a witness to history. I have a great job. In the news business, reporters often joke that it's amazing we get paid for having so much fun. And that's not even including the part of our jobs where we spend a lot of time on the internet looking up cat memes. But not every job is going to be fantastic or financially rewarding or intellectually stimulating. So make sure you have something you are personally passionate about: excelling at a sport, playing music, contributing to your community, becoming part of a political campaign, or something else. You never know where it will lead. My parents were immigrants to the United States from the Netherlands, and my mother had dropped out of college, when she married my father. She got involved with the League of Women Voters and then prison reform. She discovered she had a passion for working with people and helping them with their problems. She went back to school. At the age of 48, she got her PhD in psychology and then ended up having a successful career late in life as a therapist. But that probably would not have happened if she had not, almost by happenstance, attended the meeting of the League of Women Voters. The key to success is not an IQ score, certainly not your SAT score. It's about having passion and being hardworking, demonstrating perseverance even in the face of failure, while keeping your eye on the goals you have set for yourself. Find your passion and cling to it for all it's worth. You might be surprised by the path it takes you. Now finally, before I quit stalling your impending graduation, I want to discuss your responsibilities as citizens in a world that is rapidly changing. When I graduated from college, there were only 3 national television networks: CBS, NBC, and ABC. The national news aired just once a month. I mean, not once a month, once a day, for a half hour each night. Magazines such as Time and Newsweek summarized the week's news. When I started my career, there were no newspaper websites. Cable TV was in its infancy. Reporters and readers did not have instant access to transcripts or YouTube videos of news briefings or congressional hearings. To do any sort of research, you had to go to a library. To send someone hate mail, you actually had to send them actual mail. Quite honestly, it was a chore. Expanded access to information for both readers and reporters has many advantages. I could not write the fact-checker column on a daily basis without the vast resources of the internet. But technological changes have also come at a cost. Newspapers and evening news shows that once provided Americans with a common point of reference. Now we are increasingly sorted into ideological cul-de-sacs, able to decide if we want our news slanted left or right. On top of that, Facebook and Twitter have built algorithms to decide what you should be reading based on what you've already read. Critical question is whether additional access to news and faster dissemination of information is better informing us or making us increasingly intolerant of other points of view. The internet has opened up a world of information and facts for non-journalists, but that freedom is wasted if people are content to only absorb facts and political analyses that match their blue or red political inclinations. We seem to have gotten richer with information and poorer in knowledge and understanding. So one thing you all can do is diversify your social media feeds. You will learn more from people who challenge your assumptions and preconceived notions. Be open to new ideas and don't jump to conclusions. Read the article, not just a headline. Now, the good news is that the Pew Research Center has found that younger Americans are better than their elders at separating factual statements from opinions in the news. So maybe we need to worry more about your parents. Help us, please. It will take a lot of patience on your part, but to be fair, we just spent 18 years looking after you, and believe me, it was exhausting. So it's your turn now. Congratulations to the class of 2019.